Dear hearts, could I have your attention, please? Thank you so very much. If everyone could take a seat, there are seats up front if you would like to come up, several seats. I see 2, 3 seats up front. Does everyone have, are you comfortable? Good, good. Welcome to spring. In the beginning, we would like to introduce the trustees of Lincoln County Health, and at this time I'd ask you to stand, if you would, wherever you are. Thank you very much. Well, dear hearts, it is so good to see all of you here tonight. I want to thank you for coming. We're here in this beautiful opera house, which is very historic here in the Boothbay region, and it had a vision for the future and has worked so very hard and with many changes, but we've seen now it come to fruition under Kathy's leadership and many others into a beautiful opera house, and so we're happy to have all of you here this evening. We're here because we all care very deeply about health care. It's really a personal and it's an emotional concern because it affects each one of us. It affects us in our community. It affects our family, our friends, all of us. We are a caring community, and we really are a caring community. We meet at Hannaford and the Y and the post office and the Legion breakfast. We meet at the Rotary Bowl supper, even though it is on Holy Thursday. We meet at the churches, we meet downtown, we meet at the parades, we meet on Memorial Day. We are a caring community and we care about each other. And it's important that we hear one another tonight and that we share that caring and that love that we show all year long. Tonight we come as a caring community to discuss health care for all of us here and St. Andrews. We have an opportunity to hear a presentation and we have an opportunity to ask questions. Tonight, as we do come, we need to remember and respect one another and be courteous to one another as we are all year. When we ask our questions, we can agree to disagree, but we never are going to be disagreeable. I have something up here, dear hearts, and don't make me use it. You know, we can reject an idea, but we never reject a person. And tonight I would ask all of you very much to allow each person to have a question. Therefore, if you have a question, then state your question, but let other people then ask other questions. We can keep it that way, then everyone has an opportunity. Raise your hands. We will have mics that will go around the room. You have every opportunity to ask the questions that you would like. There will be time for that. But I do ask you not only to respect one another, but to be courteous, as I know that you are. Remember, we're here to discuss policies and ideas, not people. And we keep our questions brief, and we don't need to elaborate on them. Just keep them brief so that other people, that we can be respectful of one another. Tonight, we will have a presentation to begin with. Dr. Forey may answer some questions also. And then we will go on to the period of questions. Dr. Forey's vitae and bio is in your program tonight. I hope all of you picked that up as you came in. He has a very impressive vitae, but I also know that he is one of the most respected physicians, especially in emergency room departments around the whole state of Maine. And it is an honor for me tonight to present him, Dr. Forey.
Mary Jo, thank you so much. It's an honor to just share this platform with you. I'm very grateful for your introduction and your presence your guidance and your counsel through everything that I've had the opportunity to work with you. I'm just very, very grateful for all of that. Thank you all so much for coming. The plan today is I'm going to offer a discussion about our vision for St. Andrews. And I'd like to go through this, if I may, and then invite questions following that presentation. Initially, the questions perhaps about the clinical questions. I'd be happy to field those, and we'll also open them up to the full panel here for any questions you might have about St. Andrews. So for today's presentation, we'll touch base on our organizational vision, and then we will also talk about the future of healthcare in general and how it relates to the Boothbay Peninsula. Our model of care, which is a new model. It's not unique to St. Andrews or Lincoln County Healthcare, but it's an important change in medicine that we believe is going to improve care for everybody, not only across our own local community, but across Maine and throughout the country. And then our plan specifically for how that will impact St. Andrews, the St. Andrews campus, which I know we're all very interested in. So one of the ways that you can get a sense of how things change is to look at different types of vision statements. And this is a vision statement that would apply to Lincoln County Healthcare. And it's that Lincoln County will have the healthiest communities in Maine. And like a lot of vision statements, it sounds nice. I don't think people would argue with that. But if you put that up against an older, more common type of vision for a healthcare delivery system, it might say something like working together to provide the best in community health care. And on the surface, they sound very, very similar, but there is something uniquely different about those two statements. In the lower one, the traditional one, is we are going to provide care. If you're sick, you can come, we'll provide that care. And the top one talks about managing the health of an entire population, and those are very, very different things. And as we'll see, that looks towards wellness. It looks towards a different approach to medicine that we believe is better. So any good historian will tell you that the best way to think about the future and to plan for the future is to take a good look at the past. And as some of you may see, this is definitely a past. If you're going to put a time frame on that, looking at the uniforms and the haircuts, early 60s, something like that. I remember that outfit a bit because that was really my first introduction to healthcare. I was maybe 3 or 4, something like that. Went to the doctor's office with my mother, saw a nurse like that, pretty nice to look at, and for some reason I was bent over her lap having a child's story read to me, and then received a shot in my behind, which I didn't think was that nice of an introduction to healthcare, but it left an impression. And then there was a nurse who looked a bit like that, who used to walk home from work past my house, and I remember being very careful to neither cough or look sick in any way for fear that I'd be dragged into the hospital, get another shot, and I really, really didn't want that. So that was my experience of healthcare. But if we looked across what was going on in healthcare in the 60s, there are a few things that are pertinent to this. One is there was no such thing as an emergency physician. The title didn't exist. There was nobody trained. It just didn't exist. There weren't emergency departments. There were emergency rooms, and they were exactly that. They were a room. And the doctor that cared for somebody in an emergency room was the doctor. It wasn't a specialist. It wasn't anybody with special training. And that's what emergency services looked like. EMS was also very, very early on in its development. But at that time, people were noticing that that was a hole in the broad spectrum of the delivery of healthcare. So much so that the Institute of Medicine and researchers at Harvard and others noted that that was the weakest link in the chain of survival, was that initial care, the emergency care, and that was the highest rate of negligence that occurred in medicine was in that setting. And so we recognized that there was something that needed to be addressed. If you move forward into the 70s, so I've got my first job in 1978 as a house orderly. We wore white like that. It looked a bit more like the 60s than it did today if you walked into a hospital. And in 1978, there was some improvement in terms of the health care that we delivered, but there were still continued to be several challenges about the health care and the way we delivered it. So for instance, if you had a heart attack at that time, depending on who you were and where you lived, you had about a 1 in 5 or at best 1 in 10 chance of dying. So things were treated very differently in the 1970s. And as we move forward, we'll see that those times in the 70s were not necessarily how you wanted to practice medicine. In terms of emergency medicine, those were the first residency programs in emergency medicine. And it was in 1978 was when the Advanced Trauma Life Support Program began, looking at trying to save people's lives who routinely were not surviving because the level of quality of care was suboptimal. So if you then fast forward to today and the trends in healthcare, there's several things here that we can look to. This picture here is the back of an ambulance. It's a Boothbay Regional ambulance, and that is an iPad in the back. And Dr. Tim Fox, along with Scott Lash and Robbie Ham, have developed a really innovative way of communicating so that we have telemedicine into the ambulance, directly looking to, talking with the patient, and that is an enormous step forward. And one of the things that I think is really important to understand is that the pre-hospital care delivery, paramedics, and the care that they can deliver is enormously advanced compared to what historically used to be offered. So most of my career was spent in academic medical centers in large tertiary care hospitals, although I had worked in some smaller ones before I came up here. And I remember my very first patient in my first shift at St. Andrews was a gentleman, which was amazing to me, is about my age, from the state of California visiting, and he felt unwell and then collapsed. Somebody had the presence to call 911. Paramedics arrived, and he was dead. He had no heartbeat. He wasn't breathing. He was blue. He was unconscious. And the paramedics, as is their training, very quickly put on a monitor and were able to recognize the type of heart rhythm that he was in. They shocked him and brought him to the emergency department. By the time he arrived to the emergency department, I saw him. He was awake. He was a little confused, but he was awake, looking around, trying to understand what was happening. We cared for him in the emergency department. He had a heart attack, transferred him to Maine Medical Center, and he did very, very well. But if you're asking who saved that person's life, that was the paramedic. There was an entire team that worked together to provide excellent care, but the pre-hospital care was the most important part of that patient's care. And that is what's different in one of the significant evolutions when we look at medicine today. So those types of medical advances show us that we need to practice medicine in a new way. And one of the other hallmarks of how medicine is changing is that we have declining number of patients in the hospital. And some people would see that as a bad thing. It makes it very difficult to manage hospitals, to track resources. But this is really very, very, very good news for multiple reasons. The first part of this is that patients now in the emergency department can receive enough care that they don't have to be in the hospital. So how many people know a friend, or maybe it happened to you, you went to the emergency department years ago and you were admitted to the hospital for a few tests? That was a very common scenario. Now people are concerned about their length of stay in the emergency department. However, you can be in an emergency department for 6 or 8 hours, and that you can have the work done that would normally take 2 or 3 days in the hospital. That's great news. It's less expensive, it's better care for the patient, they get to go home, but it doesn't have a patient left in the hospital. Also, when you have a procedure, used to routinely require admission to the hospital several days after an operation. Today, those patients oftentimes go home the same day. So the fact that there are less patients in the hospital is good news for healthcare, and it's good news for everybody here. It's less expensive, and it's better care. Another significant advance in healthcare is that people are able to travel around. Automobiles are very efficient, and so in the past where you went to your doctor, it was the local doctor in town. Now people have a choice, and so they can drive to different hospitals. They may elect to go to Penn Bay or Miles or St. Andrews or Midcoast or Maine Medical Center, and that's okay. But people now have a choice, and that impacts the way we deliver care. Some people have chosen not to use St. Andrews as their source for healthcare, and that's okay. They may use Parkview, they may use Midcoast, but that changes the dynamics, and it changes the way you're going to design a healthcare system moving forward. And the things that are going to impact patients' choice are a few things. One of them is affordability. We have a challenge on our hands. St. Andrews and Miles are the two most expensive hospitals to receive care if you're private pay or if you have private insurance. So we've heard over and over again that patients may choose to go somewhere else because the cost structure related at St. Andrews and at Miles is too high. So that has to be a very important part of the equation as well. Another piece is that we are now being very transparent in terms of the level of quality that we're able to offer, how that quality is measured. It's available on the internet, and so people are becoming much more clear about what they're looking for quality. And here's a really important, another development that's happened is that less care is better. It's a bit of a surprise, but we know that in communities that have a lot of testing, have a lot of procedures, in general, their health care is not as good as communities that are better stewards of their resources and use testing only when they need it. So this is important because, again, it decreases the amount of testing that gets done. It decreases the number of operations. It decreases the time you are in the hospital or whether you need to be in the hospital at all. And that has impact on all hospitals, including especially small ones like St. Andrews. The part that's hard to get across is that's great news for patients. That's great news that you don't have to be in the hospital. It's great news if you're using less tests. It's great news if you can get by without an operation. So it's a very different mindset, and it's something that's changing all across the country. Aging population is going to be important for us to understand how we should care for these patients. We are the wisest county in the wisest state in the United States, which is great to have that brain trust. However, sometimes things don't work as well as they used to, and that requires some additional work. And the best way to approach that is through collaboration. Competition in the healthcare area doesn't go well. It drives up costs, it drives up increased utilization of tests, and that's not the way to approach it. And so all across the country, we're learning that collaboration provides better care at lower cost. And that's the direction that we need to be moving forward to. So our model for care at St. Andrews, this is a beautiful aerial view of the campus. It includes the hospital building as well as the family care center. And as you look at this, on October 1st, if you drive into that campus, it will look exactly the same. And all the doors will work the same, and the people will be there. There are a few changes which I will talk about, but the thing to recognize is that all of this will be here, the people will be there, the cars will be there, and so the question of, is the hospital closing or not, that's why you hear on occasion different answers to that question. The hospital, that building, the St. Andrews Hospital building, that is not closing. The people are still going to be there, and we'll talk about the services that will remain. If you're talking about the status of the hospital as being called a hospital, that will change. But that campus is going to remain intact and be fully utilized, as we'll talk about. So one of the things that we know is that we need to change the way in which we practice medicine in many different fronts. And one of the things that is very different, and again, a key change from the way we practice medicine historically, is that a lot of things used to be built around the doctor. That was convenient for us who were doctors. It was not great for patients. And so the new design is built around the patient and their family. And that is the whole approach to changing the way we deliver care. And in order to do that, there is a new movement called the Patient-Centered Medical Home, oftentimes called shorthand, the medical home. And I know this writing may be a little bit difficult to see in the back, but you have insert into your handout that has this exact diagram, the full diagram, that you can look at if you're inclined. And what's different about this is, as you can see, Dr. Alamo is there, great interaction with the patient, but it's becoming complex enough that he's unable to do all of that by himself. And he needs additional support. And there are a lot of additional services that we are now building into the Family Care Center and primary care practices throughout our system and throughout Maine Health. And they include care coordination. So one of the biggest challenges that we've had historically is that patients be discharged, say, from Maine Medical Center, and they have a very difficult time coupling that back to their primary care physician, say at the Family Care Center. And having a nurse who can help with that transition, who can call, check in, make sure the medications are right, is extremely helpful. We also know that for some patients with very complex illness, having somebody dedicated to help them with their appointments, their scheduling, their medications, to make sure that they're getting the services they need, sometimes called a nurse care manager, that's incredibly important and incredibly helpful, and we're adding those resources to the Family Care Center. We've embedded mental health services, so there's a therapist in the Family Care Center, because a lot of the problems either are symptoms related to mental health issues, or very difficult problems are going to be stressful and patients need help with that. You build those in along with pharmacy resources. So if you're on 15 medications, having the ability to sit down with a pharmacist to sort out what are the right medications, how should you take them, tracking how you are sure you've taken them, pharmacists can be extremely helpful with that. And what we know is that when you change that type of practice to this medical home model, there are several things that happen, and you'll notice a theme coming up as we talk about these. One is that it costs less overall because there are less mistakes and the care is better coordinated and patients do better. So this has been studied in several different places, Johns Hopkins University, University of California at Berkeley. Several different places have published studies on this and have shown that if you're in a medical home like that, your chance of dying is decreased by 20% compared to if you simply see a specialist and you're not attached to a medical home. Your cost of care will drop oftentimes by as much as a third. So this model is a model that we believe in, that we're committed to, and that the physicians are interested in developing also not only at Family Care Center, but all across Maine Health and all throughout the state. And we believe it's going to be successful. One of the most common successes of developing and implementing this model is that people use the emergency department less. In many, many places throughout the United States, both insurance companies and medical studies have shown that the utilization of emergency departments has decreased by 25 and in some cases up to 50% if they use this model. And you can think of that from a few reasons for that occurring. One reason is that if you have evening hours or Saturday hours, for instance, patients can just go to the doctor instead of going to the emergency department. It's more convenient, and so patients that we know don't need to be in the emergency department, if they can get into their doctor that day or that evening or on Saturday if they're not working, that decreases emergency department visits. The other way to prevent emergency department visits is to take care of things like diabetes and high blood pressure so that you don't have a stroke, so that you don't have a heart attack beforehand. And utilizing this model has been shown to decrease rates of stroke, decrease rates of heart attack, and that's going to have an impact on the other services provided in any healthcare system, and especially the emergency department. So as you know, emergency department visits have been decreasing at St. Andrews over the past 6 years, down 20%. That's great news. Makes it very difficult in terms of what to do at the emergency department, but the fact that patients need to be in the emergency department is much better. People at St. Andrews have a great patient experience in the emergency department. We're very, very proud of that. An even better patient experience is if you don't have to go. Thank you. And that's the medical home model. So that's where we are trying to move forward. It's my best Marco Rubio impersonation. How'd I do? Thank you, Jim. A little bit more, okay. So outpatient and skilled. So that's the nucleus of healthcare, and that's where we should be spending our money, our resources, and our time is developing that. That's going to improve patients' experience and improve their lives. Built around that is a phenomenal group of services that will continue to be on the St. Andrews campus, including diagnostic imaging, urgent care, laboratory, rehabilitation medicine. We'll break through those one at a time as we go forward. Acute and specialty care. This is why it's important to be attached to a system. It's extraordinarily difficult. I would say it's now becoming impossible to be an independent small hospital. It's a vanishing breed, and for good reasons. You need to be a part of an integrated system. And here's a really important element of that, and that's the electronic medical record. One of our biggest problems and one of our areas where we have provided really poor care is in that transitions area. So a patient is seen at one hospital, comes to another one, we don't have the tests, we repeat the tests, we don't know what the other doctor was thinking or what they were doing. That provides for really, really suboptimal care. An electronic medical record is the answer to that. Maine Health has invested $150 million, is that correct, Bill, where we're at right now? There's no way a small hospital can entertain that type of an investment in electronic infrastructure and electronic health record. I'll give you a couple of examples of how that works. I was down at Maine Medical Center, saw a patient. It was Dr. Alamo's patient. I looked into the medical record, and all of that information was instantaneously available to me right there. Never before able to do that before. Same thing here at St. Andrews and Miles. The patients at Maine Medical Center, they have an operation, they're discharged a day later, they come into the emergency department. We have the operative notes, we have the H&P, we have the discharge summary. All of that information is immediately available to us, as well as the tests, which is fantastic. We transferred a patient down to, from St. Andrews down to Maine Medical Center. Before the patient got down there, the doctor was able to open up the record, not only see all of the office visits, but able to see the note from the emergency department at St. Andrews, see the CT scan up on the screen, look at all of the labs, and that the ability to improve care by doing that type of care is remarkable. It's enormous. So this is the bigger picture. So now we are responsible for the health of the community. It's not just providing good care for a patient who has a complaint. We as a healthcare system need to be responsible for the health of the community. And all of these pieces that I mentioned have been demonstrated to improve care, decrease cost, decrease utilization, including inpatient care and emergency department visits, and that's all good. And it's important that we be able to do that because the country cannot afford healthcare the way it is right now. We're the most expensive healthcare system in the world, and our delivery of care is not ideal. And this is what's going to be the road to get us forward to that position. So as you look at that campus, instead of looking at it as something happened to me, I'm going to go there and get help, which it will still be able to do, but this is a campus designed around wellness and around independence, keeping people healthy, keeping them in their homes, keeping them where they can get the best care, which is in the primary care center, and having them live happy, healthier lives at less cost. So here, what I'd like to do is just sort of march through the campus bit by bit. And here's the Family Care Center, which you'll recognize. And there we have family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, mental health care, care management. It's a new piece of the delivery of our care that's incredibly important, as well as specialty care. That's all there, and it's a build. That's where we're trying to build our services. If you look at the other part of this hospital here, not whited out there, if you walk in on October 1st and head down that hall, the exact same text for x-ray, CT scan, mammography, laboratory, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy, they will all be there. Those are incredibly great services to have close to home. Those all keep you well. They're all going to allow you to live longer. Those are all staying. So one of the things that we have done is we said ever since we announced this that we wanted to have a conversation with the community and that we were interested in the community's feedback. I'm sorry? In any case, so we're interested in feedback from the community, and there have been several areas to receive feedback. And there are a couple of areas that had some good ideas that we've been able to start to put into motion. One of them, as we heard across the community, that they were not really happy with the pharmacy services, that there may be an opportunity to provide that better. And one of the things that we know is that if you can build in those pharmacy services into the patient care center, into the primary care delivery system, patients do better, cost less money. So we are currently building and applying to the state for certification to open a pharmacy at the Family Care Center. In addition, the concern about elder services within the St. Andrews Hospital was heard. And so what we've done now is we have submitted a letter of intent to the state to submit for a certificate of need to allow us to provide rehabilitation as well as skilled nursing and long-term care in those same beds. That would require a significant capital investment that we would like to make. And those are two areas that we anticipate and will work very hard to achieve. And then if you look at that campus, all of those buildings, all of the space is still being used. That isn't closed. It is different. There's a different certification, but all of those services will be there. That's our vision. And then finally, the Urgent Care Center. This is obviously something that people are passionate about, and I can understand that. October 1st, if you walk in, it's in the exact same place. If you walk in, we will take care of you just as you would today. It'll have the same physicians, the same nurses, the same medications, the same equipment, the same rooms. You will not be able to tell the difference. What is different is that it won't be open 24 hours a day, and it'll be open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Another piece that we heard from the community is that initially the plan was to have it open from 8 until 6. In the off season, people were uncomfortable with that and wanted to have a consistent time, so we've moved it to 8 to 8 throughout the year. But that will be dependent on the amount of utilization of the urgent care center. And the other big difference is that there won't be ambulances that are coming directly to the urgent care center. But if somebody walks in and with indigestion, it turns out they're having a heart attack, we will be able to care for them and transfer them to Maine Medical Center as we do today, or call Life Flight if need be. The helicopter service will still be there, and that will all function in the exact same fashion. So I think probably the most challenging question, and what I will try to do is give some thoughts on this, is how can an urgent care be a better option than keeping the existing emergency department at St. Andrews? And I believe that this new vision is a better option. One of the things I want to make very clear, and this has been misunderstood in certain situations, I'm very, very proud of the care that we deliver today in the emergency department at St. Andrews. We have outstanding nurses, we have terrific physicians, and they do really, really good care. I think it's important that people not confuse that. There are, however, limitations to the amount of care and the type of care that you can deliver at St. Andrews. And so one of the questions is, what is the difference? And the most obvious one is the amount of available resources in the emergency department. So one of the things that's different is that because it is so small, we don't have in-house x-ray, we don't have in-house laboratory, we don't have in-house respiratory therapist. You have an emergency nurse, an emergency doctor, and that is it for your staffing. So a friend who is very familiar with the healthcare system recently accompanied a family member into the emergency department at St. Andrews. They didn't come by ambulance, they drove in. And that person talked to me and said, I'm a little concerned because when I got there, there is nobody there. Don't you think you should have a security guard there? And if you've ever walked in, it is extremely quiet. There are not very many people there. And we would love to have an additional resource, but I don't think I would be hiring a security guard as my first choice. But that feeling of being uncomfortable and a bit isolated in the middle of the night that this person talked to me about, that is exactly the discomfort that physicians feel when you end up with a patient who is critically ill or has a life-threatening injury or illness present. And you are limited by the amount of resources that you can bring to bear in that situation. So another difference is backup. So in backup, when you talk to emergency physicians, they mean, can you get another doctor in to help you, a specialist? And the backup at St. Andrews is none. You are it. There is nobody coming to help, period. That's okay, you can still deliver care, but again, there's kind of two buckets that we're talking about. One is patients who don't have life-threatening injury or illness, and then the critically ill, whose life is in the balance. And if you are one of those patients whose life is in the balance, you need a team to take care of you. You can do it with a doctor and nurse if that's all you have, but it is very limited and it can be very challenging. And so there are a few examples that I want to offer to you. So team-based care is another very important part of the delivery of healthcare, which is in concept a bit newer. And it's based in several different threads where it has grown up. One is cardiology. I talked to you about the gentleman who had the large heart attack and what we call a sudden death episode. He collapsed. His life was saved. He flew back to California, a healthy man. As I mentioned, in the 70s, your chance of dying from that was 1 in 5 or so. As recently as the late 90s, your chances of dying from that is about 5% or 1 in 20. Currently, with the development of team-based care and a highly orchestrated system, we're approaching a 1 in 100 chance of dying from that heart attack. That is an enormous evolution in the way we practice medicine. You can go back to the 70s, you can go back to an older style of delivery of care, but that is going to offer you a vastly different outcome. In 1978, I mentioned to you about the management of trauma patients, and every resident who goes through training, this is where they learn team-based care most quickly, because you have a large number of people around the patient. There are referral systems. What's been shown is that there's a close enough hospital. You should bypass non-trauma hospitals and go to that hospital because there aren't enough resources, because if you get stuck in a small place, you're likely not to survive that. So trauma systems have done an enormous amount of work in showing that systems-based care is really, really crucial. This picture, which you can see up here, is, I think, what all physicians, and certainly emergency physicians, find to be the most challenging, I'll just flat out say it, the most terrifying part of our job. So this child, this is an image I've found on the web. It's not anywhere here. In fact, I don't even think it's in the country, looking at the couple of the towels. But those of us who are very familiar with healthcare know exactly what's going on in this picture. And this young child's life is in the balance. This child is in a really, really, really difficult spot. And what you see is a resuscitation that's being provided for this child. And what you have, you can count the people. If you count this gentleman's head back in the corner, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people attending to this child. And that's what that child needs to have a chance to survive. So as you look at that, pick out who you think the doctor is. Yeah, that's a great choice, actually. So, you know, I think a lot of people would think, oh, it's this gentleman with the mask. He's doing something. He's taking care of the airway, and that could be a doctor. But if you're talking about who's running this resuscitation, you've got several people, and probably it is that gentleman in the white coat in the back, or it could very easily be the woman in the blue. And what's key here is that if you look at them, they look like they're doing nothing. They're just standing there. But that's not what they're doing. They are orchestrating one of the most complex things that you'll ever see undertaken, and it's being undertaken by a team. And if you're that individual and you're trying to intubate the child, or you're trying to get him to breathe, it is extraordinarily difficult to track what's going on in the resuscitation. So here you may have an anesthetist or an anesthesiologist. You've got nurses who are working on IVs, delivering medications. You have a nurse in the back who's tracking what those medications are, making sure the doses are right. They're going to help them and not kill the child. And then you have a physician who's in the back running that resuscitation. You can do it with 2 people. It's extraordinarily difficult. And delivering care with a team like that is what you want to be doing if your life is in the balance. So that is the reason why I believe it is better care, why we can deliver better care by getting the patient directly to a team-based care. So another patient that recently we had the opportunity to care for is a woman in labor who's critically ill, as it turns out, by surprise. And the question was, does that patient come to St. Andrews or not? And the wise decision was made that that patient would bypass St. Andrews and go to Miles. And at Miles, the team caring for that mother and about to be delivered baby was an emergency physician, an OBGYN physician, a pediatrician, and a hospitalist, because it was a medical problem that that patient, the mother, was suffering. And I don't care how skilled you are as an emergency physician, there is no way a single physician can outperform those 5 people working together and thinking together. And when you have a critical situation like that, if you can get to that level of care, that's where you want to be. And so there is the concern about a delayed transport, but getting to that level of care, I believe, and the other emergency physicians who have experience and training and are board certified in emergency medicine have come to the same conclusion, that that uncomfortable feeling when there is no help coming in is a concern. And being able to get to where you can have a team-based level of care delivered, that's where you want to be. The other piece, and this has been talked about to some extent also, is you want to have the experience. You want to be able to do it more than once or more than once every 5 years. And you need to see a lot of patients to be able to do that. And so having a volume of patients that come through, a pretty decent clip, allows you to maintain your skills. Again, it's not that they're not terrific nurses, not terrific physicians, but if you haven't done it in 3 years, it's hard to keep track of that kind of stuff. So finally, this is all a part of a system. It's important that you look at that not as just a single individual point of care, but how are we as a system going to deliver the best care for the most patients at the least amount of cost? That's the problem. And we believe that this vision is a great vision. It's hopeful. It'll provide better care to the community, and it'll allow us to be more efficient and be able to compete because we won't be as high cost with other providers from throughout Maine. And the ability to be a part of a system of Maine Health, that makes all the difference. And other hospitals are recognizing that. You can't get by alone on your own. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions people might have about the clinical piece, or we can ask broader questions about St. Andrews and any questions that you want. Mary Jo, did you want to say something?
Could we have the house lights up, please? Thank you so very much. And as you're thinking of your questions, remember, one question, one person. We're going to be very respectful and try to have your questions ready. I would like to introduce the panel, though. You have had the privilege of hearing Dr. Foray and this excellent presentation. On the podium here, we have Bill Caron, who is president of Maine Health, and we're very happy to have him. You have his bio and his vitae here. Jim Donovan is the president and CEO of Lincoln County Health. And we also have then Pete Mundy, who is the chair of the Board of Trustees of Lincoln County Health. And they're all here to help you and to answer any questions. Do you have some questions for Dr. Foray in the beginning? I can see you pretty well. Let me take my glasses off, I can see you better. Just raise your hand, please, if you would. Yes. Oh.
Good evening, sir. So basically what you're saying is just a change of name from emergency to urgent care.
No, I think it is more than that. In terms of what you would see if you were there 8 to 8, yes, it will be the same. You'll have the same physicians, the same nurses, the same everything that's there. We will be able to do exactly what we do for you now. However, it is different in that patients who have life-threatening injury or illness and call an ambulance, those patients, that subset of very special patients, they will not be taken to St. Andrews. They will be taken to Miles or Midcoast, and there's been a lot of discussion about that. The chief medical officer of Midcoast Hospital and the director of the emergency department are two good friends of mine. It's a terrific hospital. It's a little bit longer, but it's a terrific hospital. That would be great care as well. So an urgent care center is different, but what you will have there during the day will be the same.
Other questions?
Oh, thank you. Oh, my question is, why weren't we exposed? Excuse my voice, but I have a little problem today. But why weren't we exposed to this excellent presentation before all this took place? A complete frequency that deprived us from what I consider our right to be involved. Someone explain that.
So I'd like to just say a couple of words about that and then hand it off to Jim Donovan. You know, I think that's great feedback, and one of the things that we've learned is that we should do things differently, and there is an opportunity to improve communication and get that information out. And so that is something that we, you know, going forward, we would likely do that a bit differently. What we're trying to do now is get that information out as best we can and engage in that dialogue.
I would just add to that back in August, when we made the announcement of the changes, there were a series of slides that in my presentation that I made to a variety of groups that talked about the future of the St. Andrews campus, not in this level of detail, but it talked about the patient-centered medical home model. It talked about the focus on outpatient services and wellness and the things that Dr. Forey talked about. But I really think what happened was that the concern that was raised by a number of people in the community about the change in the status of the emergency department to an urgent care center kind of took over the whole discussion. And we were not able to get back to that message about the future vision until today. So we've been criticized for a couple of things that I'll comment on. One, that one of the questions we heard often was, why wasn't the community informed about the challenges that St. Andrews was facing? Because the change came as a surprise to a lot of people. And as Mark said, we learned from that yes, our communications could have been better. We tried. We can go back and we can pull out all kinds of articles that were in the newspaper or our annual reports that talk about challenges of healthcare in the future, the Affordable Care Act, all that kind of stuff. But it obviously wasn't effective. It wasn't as effective as it should have been, and we take the blame for that. But I really think just to get back to my point, that we wanted to try to talk about the vision for the future, but a larger conversation took over, and we actually stepped back. As many of you know, we have not actively participated in all the task force and task force committee discussions during the last 3 or 4 months. We've been working on this to try to put together a message about the future. And again, what we're talking about, this is not just St. Andrews. This is happening all across the country right now. In rural communities and larger cities, this concept of the patient-centered medical home, or the medical home, as Mark talked about, is the future for primary care. And is Dr. Alamo here?
Yes, he's in the back.
So I'm not gonna. Aki, just tell me if I'm getting this right. When you and I have talked about this, you said that from an emergency room standpoint, your job is to keep people out of the emergency room. Is that fair?
That's pretty fair, yeah.
And that's really what primary care is about. And frankly, one of my visions for this community would be that every single member of this community had a primary care physician. I know for a fact that's not true today. I'm not going to ask for show of hands. But that is so important to the future, and that's what we're trying to build. We would like nothing more than to have every single person in this community be attached to a primary care physician, either a family physician, an internist like Dr. Alamo, a pediatrician for the kids. That's really what we have to accomplish if we are going to address the major healthcare problems in this country that are attacking us from all sides right now and are affecting quality, affordability, the so-called healthcare crisis.
Yes.
Excuse me. Hello?
Hello.
Mary,
Hello?
I have a question over here.
Yes,
I must be in the dark.
Sorry.
Okay.
you are.
All right.
I can't.
Good idea. I guess one of my questions would be all of the improvements that you want to do at St. Andrews and the health center, pharmacy, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these improvements are going to take an awful lot of money. Now, why couldn't we have that money put into an emergency room that is going to stay and be operable? Why?
Let me start with that, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Forey again. I've been quoted correctly in the newspaper as saying that it all gets back to volume. This is not a money issue. This is not plow enough money into it and we'll fix it. from the emergency department standpoint, as we've been talking about, the low volume and declining volume over the last several years, many years actually, has been the driving force behind both the quality and safety concerns that Dr. Foray talked about, and those also eventually roll into financial concerns. So what we are trying to do is build something that's sustainable, that will meet the needs of the community going forward, and we feel that is this outpatient model that we're presenting here today.
Thank you for the question. And again, it's not an issue of money. I agree completely with Jim's statement. So when I first became the medical director of the emergency department at St. Andrews, Peggy Pinkham was kind enough to ask me to fill that position. My hope was that if we were able to provide the highest level of quality that we could, that would draw patients into the emergency department and it would be sustainable. We would increase the volume by doing that. And that makes perfect sense. What I didn't have is an understanding of the national trends. And what I didn't really fully appreciate from the system level is our goal is not to increase emergency department visits. Our goal is to decrease emergency department visits. And we're having some success. So despite our best efforts and despite providing incredibly compassionate and good care, limited by our resources, the emergency department volume has continued to go down. And so the question is there a likelihood that it's going to go back up? And the answer is no. In fact, we know from other places that if we implement these changes that we're in the midst of, our emergency department visits are going to drop significantly by another quarter or so. And it's not a sustainable ED either by quality, from a quality standpoint, or from a financial standpoint.
Thank you.
Mary Jo, I had a question over here.
Yes.
I have two questions. Dr. Foray, you skipped over the line item about lower costs in the urgent care center, and I wondered, I think you just missed that bullet point on the list. And then I'd like to ask Mr. Donovan something as well.
Okay.
Well, ask them both this time.
All right, and then how many doctors do you envision at the Family Health Care Center? Is that facility large enough to have enough physicians on board for everybody here to have a primary care doctor? Or are we going to have to go off the peninsula to get our primary care as well?
Thank you so much.
Great. So thank you so much for bringing up that point that I blew past it because it's an important point. And that is urgent care pricing is different than emergency department pricing. And in the handouts, you'll see that for the parts that are related to the charges for the facility and for the physician, it is substantially less and oftentimes half as much. So if it's a Medicare patient, that doesn't have any impact on Medicare patient. But if you are paying for this out of your pocket, or if you have private insurance, especially with a high deductible, that is enormously important. And the other place that this is really, really important is for employers in our community. So one of the biggest challenges, as we know, is that in order to provide health care coverage for their employees, they can't afford to offer raises, or they can't afford to hire new employees. And so this will allow that money to stay in the community, not for health care, but to stay in the employee's pocket or the employer's pocket. So that's a really important question. And I can take a stab at the first part because I think part of that is a clinical question about the Family Care Center. And the answer is yes. So it's a beautiful building. It was well built, and it is designed for an appropriate amount of space to provide primary care physicians and visiting specialists that could serve the entire Boothbay Peninsula. And as Jim mentioned, that is absolutely our vision. That will provide people better care, a better patient experience, and longer lives, unequivocally. And so that's where we hope to make the investment. Right now, we are able to manage the patients that currently come into the Family Care Center with our 3 physicians and nurse practitioner. They're terrific providers. And if we were able to bring additional people in, we, by all means, would add additional providers.
Thank you, Dr. Foray.
Mary Jo, I have a question right here.
Yes.
Dr. Foray, I have a question about staffing at the urgent care center and in the ER. You did a very thorough and tremendous job explaining the team of practitioners that you would like to have in the ER. I heard you say nurses, therapists, and doctors. I didn't hear you say anything about nurse practitioners or physician's assistants. Will those types of people or positions be staffing the urgent care center or the ER, and if not, why not?
Thank you. So I think that's a great point. The use of mid-level providers, nurse practitioners, and PAs is an incredibly important part of this evolution of our healthcare delivery, and they are an incredibly important group that is growing rapidly and providing really, really good care. And so one of the questions is when is it appropriate to have a mid-level provider providing care in an emergency department? One rule of thumb is that if you get to a volume of about 18,000 patients where you need a significant, what's called double coverage, you need 2 providers, that's a good time to add a physician's assistant or nurse practitioner, because you will be able to sort out patients that they will be able to comfortably manage fairly independently. So since both St. Andrew's Emergency Department and the Urgent Care Center and Miles don't have that many patients, you can staff it with a single physician. I know that the Advantage report suggested that we staff the emergency department with nurse practitioners or PAs, and that is done some places, and that's been described, and I'd like to add a couple of thoughts around that, if I might. One is the difference between training for a physician's assistant. I'll use them generically, and I know that better because my daughter's a PA. She went to Duke, which is a great school, the oldest and widely considered to be the strongest PA program in the country. And I can tell you that after her training, she has no business running an emergency department, and she would tell you the exact same thing. The difference between a PA's training, which is 2 years, and an emergency physician's training, which is 4 years of medical school followed by 3 years of training, is enormous. In addition to that, they have to go through 5 different levels of testing, document that they are proficient in the delivery of emergency care. Healthcare across the country has become incredibly specialized, and emergency medicine, meeting that need, is one of those specialties. And so the need to be able to run that resuscitation that you saw is a unique set of skills that emergency physicians are trained for. So why are different models present in the rest of the state? I'll touch base on a few, just a couple of them, if I might. One of them is Mayo Regional Hospital, which I know you're familiar with. So one point to keep in mind is that Mayo Regional Hospital was formed in 1978 and involved the closure of 3 small hospitals that were unable to stay open because of volume and quality issues. And they formed together to form Mayo Regional Hospital. They're staffed by PAs, but they also have in-house 24/7 a physician who's a hospitalist, so they have double staffing in-house all the time. That's a bit of a different model. I talked to the nurse manager there, who is a wonderful woman, very capable, and asked her about her PAs that she uses in the emergency department. She said they're very experienced, and I said, where would you get one of those PAs? And her answer was, you can't find them. They don't exist anymore. So finding a PA who has experience, never mind the training or demonstrated abilities, she said you can't find them. They're going to have a very difficult time maintaining that level of staffing moving forward. Another example is Mount Desert Island. So they staff with PAs. However, in the summertime, as was mentioned, they staff with board-certified emergency physicians and emergency medicine residents from the University of Pennsylvania. That's terrific. There's a large benefactor who was able to bring them in. It's a great summer experience for them. That's terrific. The part that bothers me about that is if you are wealthy and you summer there, you see residency-trained, board-certified physicians. If you're a lobsterman in January, you have a completely different level of care. To me, that just doesn't seem right. So a third example, an example that would fit is C.A. Dean Hospital in Greenville, Maine. It's right on the edge of Moosehead Lake. It's also 2 miles away from the Appalachian Trail's 100-mile wilderness. It is almost an hour to the next emergency department, Mayo Regional Hospital, which is staffed by PAs, and it's pushing 2 hours to Eastern Maine Medical Center. That's staffed by PAs. I think that makes some sense. That is frontier medicine. It's a completely different ballgame. If I get hurt or I'm sick on the Appalachian Trail and I get brought there, I'm going to be glad to see a nurse and a PA. But this is not the frontier. This is a level of care where you're going to expect the same level of expertise that you can get at Miles or Midcoast or at Maine Medical Center. And I think we have an obligation to provide that level of care.
Thank you, Dr. Foray.
I have a question.
Yes. Stacy, do you have?
No, right there.
Right here. Hi, I want to know if you could handle all the emergencies coming to you, Southport, Booth Bay Harbor, Hanscom, and Booth Bay. How are you going to handle all the emergencies at once?
So that's a great question. Thank you so much for asking it. One of the things to remember is that the urgent care is going to be open, and that over 80% of the patients are completely appropriate for urgent care. So that they will stay, and the time of day that they show up is when it's open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So the vast majority of those patients will be able to be served appropriately and efficiently and less expensively in the urgent care center. What there will be is a small number of patients that will need to be transferred to Miles or to Midcoast, and that's going to be on the order in terms of an ambulance transport of a couple of patients a day, 3 patients a day, something like that. And currently what we have is we see 12 to 13,000 patients a year in the emergency department at Miles. And as I mentioned to you, one of the cutoffs for when you need to add a PA or a second provider there is around 18,000, maybe 16,000. So in the emergency department at Miles, we have the ability to care for those patients. In part because if it all happens at once, you have backup. You have several physicians you can call in. You can call in a pediatrician if you need it, a surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, hospitalist, anesthesiologist. You can assemble a team to care for several patients if they arrive all at once.
Yes.
I guess my biggest concern would be there's 168 hours in a week, and you proposed to have 8 to 8 open. It was unclear whether it was 5 days or 7 days. Originally it was 5. So that's a tremendous decrease in service. I have no problem with an urgent care center, but I want it here 168 hours a week.
Thank you for your comment. Just to clarify, that's 7 days a week. And the challenge for us is that we don't have enough patients during those night hours, either to be able to support it from a financial statement, from a financial position, but also, more importantly, enough work there to keep the physician and nurse and other people that they're going to be around that they're going to need. We can't staff it if you're just going to see a very, very, very small number of patients. Oh, it will be. So it is open 7 days a week. So I apologize for any miscommunication. That was always our intent, to be open 7 days a week.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
First, I'd like to congratulate you on this presentation. It was very well, smoothly delivered and well thought out. But what I'd like to know is this written down somewhere? Is this going to go away tomorrow, next week, next year? I mean, what kind of insurance do we have as a community that you're going to fulfill in all of these grand ideas that you've presented tonight?
Well, I think you will hold us accountable. And the easiest way for you to hold us accountable is for you to decide to utilize the services. So it is our job to make certain that you walk in and say, yeah, you know, I could get that appointment. I called in and I got the appointment the same day. It worked out great. And that's how we're going to demonstrate that to you. Healthcare will continue to evolve. As I pointed out to you, it's vastly different from the 60s, the 70s, even in my tenure as a physician from 85 until now. It has changed enormously. Technological changes, the style of delivery, so that we expect that it will evolve. But our commitment is to provide the best care. This is our vision, and we would not only expect it, but we would welcome you telling us if we don't make that. And then what? Then we should respond to your needs.
Mary Jo, I have a question.
Thank you.
Dr. Foray, thank you very much for going through the evolution of the changes that we'll see in medical care, and those specifically that will be affecting ERs. And I appreciate very much the challenge of trying to move patients to the best center to get their best care, and recognize that as we go through the next 20 years, we'll be seeing more changes, and that having that relationship with our paramedics and our emergency medical technicians to help them in communication and relationship with the hospital. And so you obviously have been involved with them in helping create a electronic communication. How will you continue to keep that moving forward, and even all the way to Maine Med, where a real level 1 may instantly need to go? So that seems to be the link that needs to be embraced and moved forward for that make or break difference in the gentleman that got back to California.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's going to require a lot of work, and it's going to require, I believe, collaboration on multiple fronts. So Dr. Tim Fox and I have worked regularly with Scott Lash and Robbie Ham to look at what our model for the future might be. I think understandably, BRAS right now is trying to just get through this period of what we have lined up for the following year. But we'll need to work on several fronts. One is, how can we maximize efficiency and find the right staffing pattern? How can we collaborate with other pre-hospital care providers? And then how do we develop and implement new innovative tools in the ambulance? So the iPad is one. We now are able to also send an electrocardiogram electronically to the emergency department, so the physician is prepared if it is an acute heart attack, and be prepared for that moving forward. The other piece is that, as you may have read in the Portland Press Herald, I think in December, Dr. Matt Scholl, who is an emergency physician at Maine Med, he's also the state director for emergency medical services, and he is an emergency physician. He went on to do additional training, specialty training in pre-hospital care. He did a fellowship in Boston, and he, working with the Portland firefighter paramedics, and MedQ is the name of their unit, have done an incredibly innovative thing, and that is, when they arrive to take care of a patient who's collapsed, they do all of the care there until one of two things happens. Either the patient responds, or they decide they can do no more, and then they stop, and they don't even transport the patient. So that's a unique change in the way we deliver care. And what they found was that instead of just grabbing the patient and running to the closest emergency department, staying there and having paramedics provide the care increased your likelihood of surviving from 5% to 17%. So one of the things that's also important to understand is that people assume that once somebody gets to you, if you've had a cardiac arrest, you've got a pretty good chance of it. So there was an article published in the New England Journal of Medicine looking at success rates for resuscitations. And on TV, if you die on TV in a show, you got a 75% chance of living, which is great. That's really great. But if you're in the real world and you die, you only got a 5% chance of making it back. The stunning thing is that Dr. Scholl, and this has been done only in a couple of other places in the country, first in Seattle, he's demonstrated in Portland, with working intensively with those paramedics to change the way they deliver care, that they can triple the survival. And when they talked to the paramedics, they said, yeah, you know, families don't like it. They don't like it when we stay here because they want you in the emergency department. They want you to see the doctor. It's a different model. And so implementing those types of things, working very closely with BRAS on clinical initiatives, looking to partner with other pre-hospital care providers throughout the state, and I think probably importantly throughout the region, to deliver the type of care that we know is going to be less expensive and better quality, as was just pointed out by that great study. And, you know, in terms of an accountability question, which is a great question, I love that, one of the drivers is going to be, if they can't do it more efficiently, they're just going to lose, they're not going to get the money anymore. That's just the cold, hard facts. Just like with healthcare, we're not going to get the money anymore, so we better prepare to deliver better care at lower cost. And there are two articles in this past week, one in the Bangor Daily News, the other one in the Portland Press Herald, about two other remote EMS systems who are struggling with the same problem. And people in town are saying, we can't afford what you're proposing. And one system, interestingly, is saying, well, we want to have the hospital take over our system. And the other system is saying, we're getting out of that hospital system. So they're all struggling to find a way, but the driver for that is going to be both everybody's commitment to quality and the fact that the money is simply not there. And we know we can eliminate waste in healthcare, and pre-hospital care is no different than the rest of healthcare. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you so much.
There's a question here.
Yes.
I think I heard you say that the Family Care Center, now our medical home, is going to be open or is perhaps already open in the evening and on the weekend. Is that true? And if not, when will that happen?
So we have not yet gotten there. The area where we have made some success is being able to get patients in on the day that they call, or getting them in much more promptly than we used to. That required a fair bit of work. And we still have to unlock that nut to get patients in the evenings and the weekend, and we have to look at staffing for that and figure out how we can do that. So I don't have a time frame for you. Sooner rather than later is what we need to do. I think we need to do that in a matter of months somehow, but it's going to be a challenge, and it's something that we've done with pediatrics. So pediatrics has evenings hours and Saturday hours, and the number of children that we saw in the emergency department because of that has decreased, and we need to build that in on the adult side as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
The people of the region have indicated on an overwhelming basis that they want the emergency room open 24/7. Their concern with the urgent care center is that it will be closed for 12 hours a day. And my question is there any possibility of working out a compromise, accomplishing keeping it open, and maintaining St. Andrew's status as a critical access hospital?
I can appreciate the concern for that, and I can give you my opinion on it. You know, patients oftentimes come into the emergency department, and as physicians, they may have thoughts about what they would like to have done. And oftentimes, we know as physicians that that may not be in the best interest of the patient. And what we do is we sit down and talk with the patient, explain why whatever the test might be or the procedure might not be the right thing to do. And in general, that conversation goes pretty well. Occasionally, we have a very difficult time with it, but in general, that goes well. And so from a physician standpoint, I can tell you that it is my complete belief that maintaining that emergency department with the number of patients that move through it, knowing that the number of patients that go through it is going to continue to go down, is not providing the appropriate level of care. So we have studied this extensively with the physicians throughout Lincoln County Healthcare, talked to our colleagues in the state as well as across the country, and I can tell you that that is the overwhelming belief. And this is not the first time a decision like this has been made. So for instance, a very difficult decision was made some years back by the folks at St. Andrews to stop delivering OB care. That was the right decision. I'm sure it was not well received at the time. But if you're looking to provide the best level of care for a mother and her baby, that was the right decision, and it was a very difficult decision. Another decision that was made at the same time was that they would no longer do emergency surgeries. And that was the right decision. And people, I'm sure, were very disappointed they could no longer have their babies at St. Andrews Hospital. But from a quality of care standpoint, that board, that St. Andrews board, made the right decision, and the community has been able to adapt to that. Another decision that was made along those lines, and this was made by individual providers on a case-by-case basis, so it didn't make it into the newspaper, but surgeons like Garth Miller and Ed White, eventually along the line they said, you know what, we shouldn't be doing this particular case at St. Andrews. It's too complex, we don't do it enough here. The opportunities for a bad outcome based on those factors, I'm not going to do that case here anymore. It isn't that they were trying to drive care somewhere else. It's that they knew in their heart as a physician the best thing to do for the patient was to not do that procedure there. And so one of the things that physicians have to do is they have to follow their ethical code, primum non nocere. That was in the newspaper. It's extraordinarily difficult for anybody to internalize what that is like unless you're in the physician's seat. Because there's risk either way. And so what we've done is spent our years of training, our years of experience. We've talked with our colleagues and said, what is the right thing to do here? And we believe from a clinical standpoint that that is not the right thing to do. In the exact same way the decision was made to not deliver babies at St. Andrews, in the exact same way the decision was made not to perform major operative cases and not to do major joint revision surgery at St. Andrews. It was time, and that's what it is now. So as an emergency physician, I don't know that anybody's going to be able to change my mind. We read the iVantage report. We considered it carefully, and there was no information there that made me change my mind from a clinical standpoint about where the best care for that patient is going to be.
Allow me to add to that, if I might. We've heard on a number of occasions about the question to which you referred. Are you in favor of maintaining St. Andrews as a critical access hospital? There are 5 people on this stage who would vote yes on that question. The reality of being able to do it tells us otherwise, however. There's a difference between voting with your heart and voting with your head. And for the reasons that we're talking about here, for the reasons you've seen in the white papers we've put out, and the reasons you've seen in the newspaper, our Board of Trustees, our medical leadership, our administration has studied this from every aspect. And the decisions we've made were hard decisions. These decisions did not come easily, but they're the right decisions. So I think those kind of straw poll questions show us the kind of support that St. Andrews deserves. No question about it. The people who take care of you at St. Andrews deserve that kind of support. However, as we look ahead to the kind of changes that we're talking about in the healthcare world, and we look at the current state of St. Andrews as we've been talking about it here, it's just not realistic.
Any other question?
Yes.
So continuing with the reality situation, my understanding is that you're looking to beef up the ambulance service, increase the number of paramedics that will probably be available and that will be necessary in what you've described. And I understand there will be a $250,000 donation to the communities on the peninsula. Will that money continue? And how will this all work out monetarily?
Let me start, and then I'll ask Dr. Foray to finish. From the very beginning, and actually the first discussion we had with the leadership of BRAS was before we made our announcement to the community. So we brought them in early because we know that this was going to affect them. What I told Robbie Ham and Scott Lash that day, Stevie was there as well. I said, guys, the kind of pressures that we're facing as a healthcare organization here at St. Andrews and in Lincoln County Healthcare are the same pressures you face and vice versa. Low volume, declining reimbursements, increasing expenses. But what we said to them that day, that we're committed to partnering with you to build the best possible EMS system for the Boothbay region. And there's a number of components to that they're in place right now. You mentioned the donation, and what we've said, we have committed to a $250,000 donation to be split between the 3 towns for this year. And there's all kinds of legal issues that are involved with this. We cannot make a commitment for more than 1 year, according to the law. But what we did say is that we would continue our discussions with them through the course of the year to see how things are going and help them as best as we can. And we'll see what happens next year. Another element, you saw the iPad. This pilot program, and Dr. Tim Fox is sitting right down front here, this is his brainchild, is fabulous. And we've paid for that. We've worked with the BRAS folks. Right now, 4, Tim? Yep, so we have iPads in 4 ambulances and 1 in the St. Andrews ED for that level of communication. And it's going so well and it's so popular that the other ambulance services in the county are saying, what about us? And we think it's a great idea. We're going to figure out that what about us question. And then the third, and this is very important because I think it gets to you said the number of paramedics, is education. Now, for as long as there's been St. Andrews and an ambulance service, the physicians have been very much involved with the training of the EMTs and the paramedics. On an ongoing basis, year after year. We committed this year to sponsoring a course that allows EMTs to advance their skill levels to the next level, to an intermediate level. It's approximately a $15,000 cost. And we have Cindy. Where's Cindy? Have we started the program yet? Is this started? It's underway. We have 13 students, and about how many of those are BRAS people? So 13 students, 6 of whom are BRAS folks, who are all working to up their skill level when it comes to training. And that's as far as I can go. I have to turn it over to Dr. Foy. So there's 3 pieces to it. There's the donation to the towns in the amount of $250,000. There's the iPad pilot project, which is going really well, improving communication, and ensuring that when that patient is in the back of the ambulance, they are being cared for by the very best. Not only the paramedics who are back there with them, but also the doctor who's on the other end of the iPad. And then the third one is the education piece. Want to add to that?
Thanks. You know, I think the answer is we have to change it. It's the same thing is true with healthcare. We simply can't not change. It's not possible. And one of the coolest things about the iPad is that I'm confident that never would have been thought of had it not been for this change. Because everybody was kind of happy with what was going on. But there was a necessity to do something different, and that drives innovation. And that's a piece of innovation that will spread across the country very quickly. And so there are other innovative responses to that. And Mr. Karen may want to comment on that. The innovation is what's driven systems which are decreasing costs and delivering better care. And that's true whether it's the Cleveland Clinic, it's the Mayo Clinic, it's Leahy or partners, including Boston and Brigham. Those systems all are being driven to change the way they deliver care at decreased cost. And everybody is working feverishly to figure out how to do that. And EMS will have absolutely those similar types of changes. Okay.
Thank you.
Mary Jo, we have another question.
Thank you. Yes.
Both Mr. Donovan and Dr. Foray mentioned earlier that this is not about money. It's that cost is not a consideration.
No.
And which it isn't, right. I agree.
You're wrong about that. We never said that cost was not a consideration.
Well, I'm corrected. My question really is not addressed to either of them. The fact is that the Lincoln County Healthcare has used various numbers, fully audited, but never the bottom line. I think everybody should know what the bottom line is. Even a jury member will know what is the bottom line. And for example, the audited numbers prepared for St. Andrews include a 28-page report, and the bottom line is the bottom line. It's the last line in the book. It has 2 underlines under it. And yet the profit and loss reported for St. Andrews is always some other line. For example, the operating profit and loss. Dr. Zimmerly mentioned earlier about this beautiful opera house. Now, should this opera house be closed because, after all, its operating profit is negative? It loses money every year, according to, therefore, according to all of your protestations, it should be closed. But my question is not for them. I do have a question for the trustees, and I'll address my question to Dr. Zimmerly.
Oh.
And I've met a number of the trustees. They're all very fine people. And I'm sure so are the people at CH and at Miles Memorial. But my question for Dr. Zimmerly is this. Given the fact that there has been this profusion of P&L statements issued, none of which are, quote, the bottom line, have you ever visualized yourself as the defendant in a criminal trial with a bulldog prosecuting attorney waving the St. Andrews annual report and pointing out that it's inaccurate, that it does not report the true bottom line for St. Andrews? And
yeah. Thank you very much for addressing it to me. However, Bill Karen told me that the moderator does not speak. The moderator stands here and looks intelligent and allows everybody to thank you. I am attempting to look intelligent, and I'm blinded by the light, but I try so hard to see your beautiful faces. So thank you so much. I'm not a CPA, and Bill is going to do it. He told me, no, the moderator never speaks anything else, I think.
For those of you that know Mary Jo, that's the first piece of advice she's ever taken from me. Let me try something here. How many folks in the audience are CPAs? I was hoping someone other than Stacy would put their hand up, because my next question is going to be, how many folks in the audience have been a partner in a Big 8 accounting firm and audited and signed off as a second partner reviewer for 30 audited financial statements for Maine hospitals in the course of a year? Okay, and so I'm here to tell you tonight, Mr. Hagan, you're wrong. And so you are wrong. We have tried to describe to you that you are reading the wrong line off a set of financial statements. You are not interpreting it the way generally accepted accounting principles interprets profit and loss. You are going to a statement that talks about change in unrestricted funds, which is not a profit and loss number. Your local paper has looked to an expert in Indiana who told you that you were wrong. And so tonight you continue that. And so all I can say is we have a difference of opinion in terms of how you read financial statements and how certified public accountants read financial statements. And I think we leave it at that. Unfortunately, this whole issue has resorted to name calling. People have been called liars. Tonight you just challenged a wonderful board member in this community over that same issue, and it's just not right. So I'm here to tell you tonight, Tom, you're wrong.
Yeah. Stacy, do you have another person there?
I had one on this side, Mary Jo.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes.
Hi, it kind of goes to what everyone's been saying tonight about decisions that get made and accountability of what's going to happen going forward. And you had mentioned that, you guys voted, and one of the things that kept coming up in our ongoing task force meetings has been the Board of Trustees also vote, and they're members of our society and our community and our peers. And clearly somebody misread the signs because we're all here tonight how many months later. So for accountability and going forward, do we get to see some say or talk to board members or somebody or be involved in that process so they actually have the pulse of what the people want? Because we really missed it on this.
In a couple of different ways, we've tried to answer that question partially in writing. Let me try it this way. The role of a board of trustees in a not-for-profit hospital is to represent the community. As you all know the history, St. Andrews became a not-for-profit hospital in 1955 when a board of trustees, the original board of trustees, acquired the facility from Dr. Gregory. And since that time, that board and all of its successor boards have had in place a process to bring new trustees onto the board committees. People who would represent the community, who would be in touch with the community, who would be able to understand the needs of the community. And that's the way we made this decision last summer. And you know, clearly there are people, a lot of people in the community who felt that the decision-making process that we went through was didn't make any attempt to be inclusive of the broader community. And that's true. And it's the nature of our structure that caused the decision-making process to be that way. Now, we've learned a lot over the course of the last several months, kind of in this regard. Mark's talked about it a little bit. I have as well. That when it comes to first keeping the community better educated about what's going on in healthcare through a variety of means that we can use, either written means or maybe more community forums kind of like this, just to get people together to talk about what's going on in healthcare, and making more of an effort to keep people informed with what's going on in Lincoln County Healthcare, St. Andrews, Maine Health. We will do that. We will make our best effort to do that. And I think I can speak for all the trustees that are in this room, which are most of our trustees are in this room tonight, in saying that. There's an old saying that in order to communicate, you communicate 8 times in 8 ways. And maybe it's now 16 times in 16 ways. I'm not sure what the number is. And that has to be something that we take, you know, very seriously, because I promise you that what we're seeing right now in healthcare is a pace of accelerating change that has never been seen before. So what we're talking about here today, the changes that we're talking about here today, we're going to see more changes, and we're trying. We believe the model that Mark presented earlier is our response to the changes, to put in place something that's sustainable, that truly meets the needs of the community. But we're always going to be dealing with this accelerating pace of change, and that requires communication with the community to keep people up to date with what's going on, why it's going on, and ask for input, and we will do that.
Mary Jo, we have a question back here.
Just one more question, I think, because we want to keep, yes.
When we all started talking about this, one of the things that came up is with the urgent care clinic being transitioned from the emergency room, an ambulance could no longer go to St. Andrews. As we all know, time is of the essence. There are different levels of emergencies, and it all depends on who you are with that level. If you're the person having the emergency, it's always top priority. One of the things that came out of the conversations between you 4 gentlemen up there and the task force when we were sitting down talking is Dr. Foray had explained the level of care that would be given at the urgent care clinic. It's going to be the same, from what he has told me, as what is currently available in the ED, but you can't access it by ambulance. One of the things that I had suggested to you folks was that you look at getting the licenses and approvals so that an ambulance such as Bras could go to the clinic. That way you wouldn't have to go off the peninsula every time you sat in an ambulance. Has that idea been put off the side and negated?
Thank you for the question. So the decision point about ambulances and going to the urgent care center, which will be different from the emergency department at St. Andrews, the decision is to not have ambulances go to the urgent care center. We considered this a lot and talked about it internally, talked about it among our providers, and the reason is for the points that I played out in the discussion, and that is patients fall into a couple of categories. I mean, just for ease of segregating patients, you've got patients that are at risk of dying, like the baby in the picture. And then you've got patients who need health care, but there isn't a time crunch. And it's the patients who are at risk of dying, they need that higher level of care that we are unable to deliver oftentimes at St. Andrews. And that is the differential. That's why we believe it's a better level of care. So let me be perfectly clear and unequivocal about this. So if my child is critically ill down here, or if I have a heart attack, or I've been involved in a motor vehicle accident, it's me, it's as personal as it can get. I want to be in the rig with Scott Lash, lights and sirens, on my way to Miles, because I know the different level of care that you can deliver. Now, if time isn't that big of a deal, then it becomes a matter of convenience. So the whole point hinges on clinical decision about what the best level of care is. And this has been feedback that Tim Fox and I have received from our emergency physicians, especially ones that have worked in several other settings, is they're uncomfortable with the clinical scenario. There was a comment in the newspaper, it's always a bad idea to force a clinician to do something they think is a bad idea. That part, it's hard for me to not see why patients can't understand that. If it says, look, I'm uncomfortable with that, I don't think it's the right thing to do, I would not force somebody to try to do that. And what you have is the clinicians that are working there, the emergency physicians are saying, I'm uncomfortable with the care here, not that they're not terrific people, but we think we can do a better job delivering it in a different way. And it's very difficult to understand that if you're not the one making those decisions about how to care for the patient, what their risk of dying is, what are the resources you can bring to bear, and what is the best chance to save this patient's life. We take that extraordinarily seriously. And that's the primary driver. And so you would be asking us to override our opinions as clinicians. I'm not prepared to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Forey. We have two people who have had their hands up, and we are really running out of time. We want to keep faith with the Opera House. We booked it from 6:30 until 8. There have been two people, I think Smith and Bruce had their hands up. Could you briefly give your question, please?
Well, yeah, it's partly a question and partly an observation. One of the things that I think, out of all the anger and frustration that exists and still exists, and I believe will still exist after this evening, is that there's a hopeful element to this, and that is that there are people in this community, many people, who are willing to actually sit down and work with Maine Health if we had a chance to keep that hospital and the emergency room open for another year or two, or whatever it takes, for us to be proved wrong. We have not had that chance. And there is a group of people who would do that work with you. We would work with you. I know they exist. We would love to have that chance. I fear that if you continue down the road that you're going, despite all the PowerPoint slides and all of the corporate presence that you have, that you will be dragging us by our feet into the future that you see. But I think you could get our cooperation if you worked with us.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you. We really only have time for one more question. I think, Smith, you have.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for doing this tonight. It's been an outstanding evening, and I think a lot of people got a chance to hear some things. I think it's brilliant putting Mark out in front. The man could sell ice cubes to Eskimos. What I haven't heard you talk about tonight is end of life. Right now, we can bring our loved ones at the end of their lives to the hospital, which is St. Andrews, which will end October 1st. It will become St. Andrews Urgent Care Center. It will no longer be a hospital. Is there any way we can work around that? Is there any way we can find a way that when we have our loved ones at end of life, we're not having to drive to Brunswick or Damascus or Portland?
Yes, thank you so much. And that was one of the things we heard from the community, and that was very, very important to people. So our hope, and this is something that would be terrific to partner with the community on, because we may need your help with the state, is our intent, and we've already submitted a letter of intent to the state, is to have those beds that are currently in the St. Andrews Hospital, the wing that I think all of you know, be there for rehabilitation care, skilled nursing care, and long-term care. And embedded in that is end-of-life care. And we heard that loud and clear, and we would be happy to partner further with the community. So we may need some help pushing that through the state, and we would very much welcome that help. End-of-life care is an incredibly important part of our delivery of health care. I will tell you that we haven't done it very well as physicians, as a healthcare system, and we need to learn to do that. So our hope and our vision is to do exactly that, and that was a very good piece of feedback that we received from the community.
Thank you, Smith,
Thank
very
you
much.
so much.
I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank all of you for your very thoughtful and honest questions. We really do appreciate your being here. It's very important. And so we do need to be honest about the time. And so we wish you good night. Please drive carefully and enjoy the first day of spring.